Please listen carefully.
Hi, I'm Paul Frields.
And I'm Dave Guzman.
Welcome to Practical Bass, where each week we pick a topic of interest to you, the working bass player, and we unpack it. We look at it from a lot of different angles and dimensions and hopefully shed some light from our experiences as bass players and hopefully generate some conversation with you, the listeners. We do really love to hear from you. We love to hear your feedback. We also take topic suggestions. We've done several shows at this point based on input from our listeners, and we hope that you'll become one of those people. You can visit us to give us feedback at our website, practicalbass.com. You can also send us a straight up email at podcast@practicalbass.com. You can also find us at Facebook at the Practical Bass page. You can find us on Google+. You can also find us on Twitter at Practical Bass and even on Instagram. And you can feel free to share pictures of your gear or a gig or even just a screenshot of some text with typing that you've done to describe a topic to us. We're happy to get any kind of input at all from you. We really treasure that. Dave and I look at everything we get, and we love hearing from you guys. So we hope that you will turn this into a conversation. And what is our conversation going to be about today, Dave?
This week we get to talk about bass amps.
Amps, and more amps.
Yeah.
Love amps. I love amps almost as much as I love basses.
The second best.
It's second best thing to a new bass in the arsenal.
That's right.
New amp.
That's right. Then it's cables.
Yeah. What was the first amp that you ever owned?
My first was a classic Peavy Minx.
The Peavy Minx. Is that even the sound of a minx? Like, we don't even know. Like,
I don't know what a minx is. I don't know. It might be like a different spelling, but that's what I thought of when I played the minx. I was like, here we go.
Oh my God. So when did you get that minx?
That would have been, that would have been mid 90s, and I had a use, so it might have been a few years. It was either like early 90s, mid 90s.
Yeah.
It was beaten.
Was it a big one or?
Yeah, it was actually one of the 15s.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
1x15.
Styling.
There you go.
Rocking.
Yeah.
I was basically a rock star right out the gate.
Yeah.
That's what it
you had a full-size man's amp right there.
Right.
Like a grown man.
Right. Right. Because before that, I was just playing acoustic electric bass. You know, that's where like you play your electric bass and you just like put your ear really close to the strings.
How long did you do that?
That's embarrassing. I don't want to talk about that.
Okay. It was a while.
Not on the podcast, Paul. Not on the podcast, Paul.
Oh my God. Do you still have it?
I actually, see, this is like good craftsmanship here. I actually had it all the way up until about a year ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy moly.
Yeah. And then it finally died, and then I opened it up, and it stayed open for about 6, like open, like I'm an electrician.
Yeah.
You know, that's just
Are
not
you an
me.
electrician, Dave?
I am not.
Not in any way.
I'm the guy that like takes everything apart, and I look at it, and I'm like, cool. And then
it's amazing that this makes sound.
Yeah. I'm like, what are these green boards? And then I look for the one thing that's like unplugged. Like I'm literally looking for something unplugged that's just like, plug me.
This is going to be easy. Like, you find a part that's rolling around and these little sockets that say, put thing here.
Right. That's right, with an arrow and everything. So I almost kept it out of like just for sentimental purposes, but
that amp made it like over 20 years. That's not bad for
it's pretty good.
For a starter amp.
Yeah, well, it's a Peavy. It really it was a workhorse.
That
man.
stuff is their stuff is built like, I mean, that's their legacy. They're built like tanks,
right?
I mean, you don't necessarily drive a tank every day of the week, but they do last.
They do last. How about you? What was your first amp?
Believe it or not, a Peavy Minx. It was a Peavy Minx, and it was I think 1989.
An 89, yeah.
Now, unfortunately, mine was not the amp of a grown-ass man. Mine was the amp of a young boy who couldn't afford much amp. It was a 40-watt, I think, maybe, 1/8 inch speaker.
Right.
It was limited in both voice and range and also impact. It did not move anyone.
So when you played with like a drummer, did you ask him to like not play his bass drum?
Yeah, can you, man, you're playing really loud. Because I have a little boy amp.
Can you just play this bucket for me instead?
Yeah, it was not working out well. I only had that amp for, I think, a year, and it was the year that I really like spent learning how to play.
Sure.
Like really learning how to play. Learning is a lifetime thing, but that was the year of like learning the basics, like being able to play through like Dark Side of the Moon,
right?
Front to back,
right?
And that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So what other amps have you owned over the years? Like, describe some of them.
Yeah, I think like some of the key ones that I've had, were at one point I got an Ampeg, like a 115 combo. Which was nice. Like at the time when I jumped into that, I had that like really nice warm.
Yeah, it's like the real Ampeg sound. I mean,
It didn't quite, like the band that I was in at the time was really large, so it didn't last for me because I realized quickly, sometimes you buy equipment and you realize like, oh, I needed to put more money into it.
Right.
It was just one of those things. So after that, I got into the SWR, the Studio.
Yeah.
The classic, like it looks like American machinery, right?
Yep.
It's got like the dials and the slides on it. I just love that. And it was, and I had that with, actually I paired it up. I probably was pushing it a little too hard, but I had a 115 David Eden.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then above
Eden's
that,
good stuff, man.
yeah. And then above that, I had a 212 Aguilar.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You like went deep pro right away. You're just like, all right, forget it. I got the Ampeg, I got the SWR, the Eden, the Aguilar, boom.
Yeah. It was also like it was also a time where like Craigslist was starting to really take off.
Oh yeah.
And so like the deals were great. Like I might have had to drive a little bit, but man, I was cutting some like super deals. Like I think that whole rig, not to throw a number out, but I'm going to say I got the whole thing for like under $500.
Under $500.
Yeah, it was like one of those. It was just because people were like, they were like, oh, we don't have to like put it in the newspaper. I can put it online.
Yeah.
And
and also Craigslist, like that's where people went when they couldn't afford eBay fees or something.
Right. They didn't want to deal with shipping.
Yeah, I can't afford to lose $20.
Right.
I got to go to the store and wrap it up. And
yeah. After that, I guess my next big one was actually it was probably my favorite rig was the TC setup that I had. So it was
great setup.
It was like the 450 head, and then under that, and it was the older 450. It wasn't the one that had like the auto tuner built in. Unfortunately, it was like the year before.
Yeah.
But I got it used, of course, and then I also got a 212 with that, and that one just. The 212 was like 55 pounds, and that's why I loved it. Like it was lighter.
Yeah.
Or 52 pounds, whatever.
Yeah. But for a 2x12, I mean, 2x12 is like, that is beefy.
Yeah. Because the 212 Aguilar that I had, that was that thing was, it was like a human being that I was lugging around.
Yeah.
So that I love, man, and the tone and everything I could do with that. But I traded into the what I have now is the Mark bass.
Yeah.
It's it's a 115 combo. The Jeff Berlin CMD.
Yeah.
And it's great. It's 35 pounds and it pushes a lot of air out. It's got great, the tone is great in it. So I really like it. Sometimes I miss what I had, the other rig that I had, just the kind of the power out of it.
Yeah, sure. And I've heard at least some of these rigs of yours. I mean, I've heard a BA 115, like the TC that you had. Like I played through that a couple times, where I was like sitting in at some things that were going on at the place where you had your you had your rig stash there for a show that night.
Right.
And I was there, for a thing that was going on in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And I was able to use that rig. And I'm like, well, I'm sure Dave won't mind because like he does know me. And I went ahead and plugged into it. And it sounded really good. And, and of course I know the Mark bass stuff and the APM now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is your amp resume look like?
Oh gosh. So Yeah, I didn't take that immediate jump into the stratosphere of actual amps that you did. So after my much heralded Peavy Minx journey, my next step was a 200-watt solid state crate amp.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Which was a head and a 1x15 cabinet.
Right.
And I thought the head was a big deal because it had like a 7-band EQ on it.
Right.
And a separate gain and a volume knob, which
That's
I
right.
thought was boss.
Yeah.
Like being able to like get a better, I thought I was getting, much better tone out of my basses. Well, the fact of the matter is my ear was really not as developed then. And,
Right.
it was loud. I don't think my neighbors downstairs in my, from my apartment, I do not think they dug that amp at all.
They didn't like that amp.
They probably would have liked the Peavy Minx better. So,
wonder why.
No, I have no idea. Yeah, for a while I had a Hartke kickback.
Okay.
But only for a short time, for like a year, less than a year. And I ended up trading it for a bass because some guy I knew had a Rickenbacker.
Right.
And desperately wanted it. And his was like, it was used, beat up and stuff, but it was, played great. And I ended up trading him this amp for the bass, like straight up.
Nice.
Which actually was like, it was a good trade.
Yeah.
And, I don't have the Rickenbacker anymore, honestly. But
man,
and then for a while, I had an SWR Working Man's 15.
Okay,
and that was a truly decent, truly decent amp. It was again a 115, but it had a horn as well,
right?
Unlike the crate,
right?
So it had some definition to it, and I can't remember exactly, but I want to say that was about a 200 or 250 watt amp.
Yeah.
It was again solid state.
Yep.
But it was SWR, and they made, in my opinion, much better, bass amps than a lot of other things in that price range. Which was like, I want to say like the $400 or $500 price range.
Right. Right. In fact, I think when I was looking at the Ampeg, I was looking at at that one.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's sweet. It's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a good amp. And at some point along the way, at some point along the way, like all of those amps went away. Like the crate went away, and I had this Hartke, and then I got rid of the Hartke very shortly after, and I picked up this Working Man's 15, and I had that for I think 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
Most of my gigs at that point, like they were pretty small. Like they were small to medium rooms at worst. Like I could plug into a DI and like, get the PA on, under me as well.
Right.
But, I knew what I was looking at. Like I knew that was not really a pro quality amp.
Right.
At some point, somehow, in the band I was in, their ex-bass player had this old Sound City 120. And the Sound City 120, I don't know if anybody out there knows that amp, but it had its adherents. And among them was a guy, I think his name is D. Murray. And D played with Elton John for several years.
Right.
And he was on like Goodbye Yellow Brick Road and like a bunch of his great albums. Those are D. Also toured with him. And he used to use one of these Sound Cities. And it is a gigantic tank of a head with 6 EL34 tubes in it.
Whoa.
And it is loud, really loud, like tube loud. Like I think it's 120 watts, but that's 120 watts of all tube. And it is, it is beefy.
Yeah.
So
wow.
I paired that with an SWR Goliath 2 4x10 cabinet that I had, which on its own weighed weighed like 80 some pounds. And then the Sound City head probably weighs like 60 pounds.
Right.
So this is a beefy stack that was not fun to move around.
But manly.
But it sounded, it was manly.
Yeah.
It sounded good.
Oh.
It really did. And I kept that head. I still have it.
Really?
I still have it in the closet. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, I don't use it very much, but every year I take it out just to check it, make sure it's still working good. But I don't really do anything with it.
You should call me on that day. I'd like to plug into that.
Yeah,
that'd be fun.
Oh yeah. So fess up. So So the Mark bass, is that the only amp you have now?
Yeah, that's it.
You're the minimalist.
I am the minimalist.
You're like, get the one thing that works great and just Use it.
Yeah. Hey, at least I'm consistent. I definitely walk the walk with it, but it's yeah. That's it. Just one.
No, I think that's great. I think that's great. I think so. I'm a little bit more of a collector,
Right.
and I mean, not a collector in the sense of like, oh, I buy something and then put it away on the shelf. Like, I don't go buy like, I don't know, like what do people buy? Like, I won't go buy like comic books that are wrapped up and store them, or like I don't
Right.
go buy Lego sets and then put them in a closet.
No, but you'll have the head in your closet.
I do have
but
the
once
head
a
in the
year.
closet. Well, but I did play it for a while. Like for a while, that
of
was
course.
it was my thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I do keep amps.
Yeah.
Right. So I have that still.
Right.
And I still have the Goliath cabinet that goes with it, even though it's heavy as hell.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I still have that. And
Nice.
I along the way after the Working Man's 15, I graduated to an SWR Super Redhead,
Right.
which in my mind is one of the greatest combo amps that was ever built to
Yeah.
date. 350 or maybe 400 watts.
Yeah.
I think it's got a tube preamp, solid state amp stage, and it's got a rack space in it, so I can put a compressor in there.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think I still have this old Alesis 3630 compressor that I think I have in it.
Very cool.
And you can say what you want about Alesis gear, but that compressor has a great sound for bass. Like, it always sounded great. When I put that in there,
Yeah.
it really sounded well. I mean, and that compressor, it's 2 channels, so I only have to use one.
Right.
But if I wanted to, I could like dual stage compressor, which is kind of fun.
Right.
I don't really do that, right? I've just got the one stage that I'm using, but it's got separate controls for everything.
Yeah.
Right? And if people are interested in compressors and what they can do, go back in the Practical Bass archives and you'll find that we've got an episode called Squash It With a Compressor or Smash It With a Compressor.
That's right.
Yeah, you can go hear us talk about how compressors work and why they're so awesome.
Yeah.
So I've got one of these in a rack in that Redhead, and I still have that Redhead, right? So that's amp number 2, I guess, that I
Right.
still have. I have my Mark bass.
Right.
I have a little Mark Tube 800, which I absolutely love.
Yeah.
8 pounds,
Right.
Class D amplifier, but it's got a tube preamp in it.
Yeah.
So it still has that warmth and that bite that I love.
Yeah.
And, I pair that. I've got a 2x10, a Mark bass 2x10 and a Mark bass 1x15, which I can mix and match with it or use
Right.
them both at one time for a really big gig.
Yep.
So that's amp number 3.
Right.
And then late last year, I found an amazing deal. A guy was selling an original 1961 Ampeg B15N. And I found out the N stands for new. Like the first year they made the B15, it was 1960. And then the next year, 1961, they came out with the B15N because it was new. And that is, an all tube amp, 115
Yeah.
and my gosh, it's absolutely incredible. I had to sink some money into, putting it back in shape because the speaker was completely blown. There were components that were like fuzzed out and stuff, and
Yeah.
had to, I had to put some money into it, but it was so worth it.
Right.
So that's amp number 4. And, ostensibly I've got this other rack that I keep like this. I have this kind of makeshift amp that I used to use for big gigs, which was basically like a big Mackie head that I
Right.
had bridged. And then I would pair that with a bass preamp and then just run that into that SWR cabinet I was telling you about, that 4x10. And that was like for a big outdoor gig, it would totally be enough.
Right.
Like that was like 700 or 800 watts,
Right.
and sounded great.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can really count that as a bass amp, but that's still in the closet too.
Yeah. So, rhetorical question: how many do you actually need?
None of them. None of those. No. I definitely don't need that many. I do not need that many. And
Define need.
Yeah, need is a strong word. I like having them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do not need that many. Like if somebody else, I don't know, if I ended up in a situation where I was just like, hey, I have to scale down and here's why. Easily I could get rid of all of those other than the Mark bass.
Right.
Right. And that would be like, I would in a second, if I had to, scale down to those. Right.
Well, because it's flexible and it's a workhorse.
Yeah. I mean, all of them have it. All of them have their charm. The Sound City is just like, you don't find those anywhere. And so that's worth holding on to.
Right.
Because it has a unique sound. The Ampeg, honestly,
that's a need.
In 20 years, I could probably sell it for 3 times what I sunk into it. The Redhead, questionable whether I could do the same thing with that. Although it is still in fantastic shape, sounds amazing, and my daughter has it right now in jazz band. But again, don't need it. I've got it's a very heavy combo, weighs like 90 some pounds. I don't like moving it.
Right.
Even on wheels, it's heavy. My Mark bass, I love. It's, we're not getting paid for this. We're not Mark bass endorsed or anything like that. I know we both mentioned them. It's coincidence, but I can't tell you, my Mark bass is now, I've lived with that Mark bass now for 4 years, I think.
Right.
And it has done countless gigs.
Yeah.
And I am very, very happy with it. And I can essentially I can strap on my bass and my mono bag. I can carry my pedal and the Mark bass amp amp head in one hand.
Yeah.
2x10 cabinet in the other, and I can get out of the car in one trip.
Yeah.
So that's the key. One trip, right?
One trip wonder. That's it.
I mean, I'm a little awkward as I waddle down the road, but I can do it. Right. So what about you? Are you happy with the one? Just, hey, you're a 1 amp man. That's how you are.
Yeah. It's like, the obsession sometimes gets a bit far. So right now, I'm actually at a point where I realize I need another amp.
Yeah.
Right. Like there comes a point where you can scale down so much, and for all the reasons why I went back to a combo, like after all these years, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm missing, kind of the girth of a full setup. Yeah. And so, and I'm also right now in a position where I'm doing a lot of studio type stuff, so I'm moving my rig a lot.
Yeah.
Right. So all of a sudden it's like, from a functionality standpoint, I think if you have a place that you rehearse or that you're writing, even though I'm not doing it right now, I would highly recommend, like I can see the value of having that second amp where it just stays there.
Yeah. Yeah, like there's one sitting beside us here in the Practical Bass studio. Like my Mark bass is typically set up here for rehearsals and practice and stuff. But in my office in the other room where I have most of the other recording gear and things like that, like I've got my Redhead was living there until recently. I moved it out back to the school where my daughter's taking jazz band, so she's using it, and I have my Ampeg in there now,
right? Which
is cool. It is nice to look over and just see like this cool old amp. But I can't not have an amp in there. I have to have an amp that I can just like pick up and just get playing if I want to.
Yeah, and because and if you're in like that, if it's sitting in a studio somewhere, it has a certain like plug-in and configuration and all of that.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely, I think right now there's like I'm looking at different options as to what to do with it, and I can like what's nice is with the even with the combo for the Mark bass, I can actually throw their like 210. Like whatever it is, like a Traveler 210 or something like that, right?
The Traveler, yeah.
And it'll and then the actually I can connect it to the combo amp because there's a way to plug into that, and then it'll throw out like 500 watts.
Yeah.
Right, so it'll give me like a full setup, but then I still need I want one setting. So I think I not only need I need like a cabinet and an amp.
Yeah.
That's my need list right now.
Yeah, like you want basically a whole other rig that you can move for those bigger things.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I personally think that's probably the ideal setup. I mean, like I said, I've got these little pieces here and there, but for all intents and purposes, I think if you have one smaller amp that is easily portable, right? That can either lives in your studio or maybe travels around a bit, but it's not a hassle to get in and out, right? And then a bigger amp that is a hassle to get in and out, maybe, or at least a big stack or something like that, whether it weighs a lot or not, that you can take to those big gigs when you need it. When you really need that power. And I personally think like having a set of cabinets and a head that you can kind of mix and match up or down to whatever you need. Yeah. In my mind, that's the absolute best situation. Right. Yeah. And that's why I really like the Mark bass stack that I have with the, it's got the head, it's got a 210s, and then it's got a 115. Yeah. That between those three components, I could basically I feel like I could do whatever I needed to. Like take one cabinet with me to a gig if it's not a big one. Right. The 10s if I'm looking for a crisp sound. Yep. The 15 if I'm looking for a real mellow sound. Right. Or if I'm going to a big gig, take the whole kit and caboodle. Right. Right. Because that Ampeg, I'm telling you right now, the classic Ampeg, that isn't leaving the house. Right. That is never leaving this house. Yeah. I mean, literally, unless it starts to flood. Right. Do you have any wish list amps or amp setups out there? Do I have a wish list? So I would say the one thing I would love to have in a way I want it, but in a way I think I 10% want it, 90% no, I do not want it. Yeah. Is an SVT stack, like an 8x10 classic. Right. 8x10. That's right. And the tube head weighs a million pounds. Right. And it would never leave the house. Yeah. But there's number one, there's no reason for me to have that. I don't need it in the house. It's way too loud, although they sound amazing. Right. They're way too loud, and I would never, ever want to move it. Right. It stays. It's a piece of furniture. That's a stupid thing to want, and I cannot help it. Right. But I'll tell you, but really, like in more seriousness, I would love to get one of those like little Phil Jones, like those little the bass arrays that he makes. Right. Like the briefcase array that's like a 2x5 or something like that. Yeah. That is boss. Yeah. I have no idea how it sounds, but it looks awesome. It does. And I've heard they sound great. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of cool stuff. Like any of my wish list items, it's just like, they're pieces that I've never played because they're not in stores, around. I mean, you've really got to seek them out. Yeah. And we're kind of like left to this whole, like the publicity thing with YouTube, and you're like listening to it in a weird way. Yeah. For me, I've got like for amps and cabinets, it stayed with the DNA. They had like a 1350. Now they have like I think last year they came out with an 800. So it's a kind of a, more budget friendly one. Yeah. Yeah. But it's the same guy. It's the David Eden guy. David, I don't know what his last name is, but he's the guy that this is his brand now. After I thought it was David Eden. Like I thought that was his name. Yeah. I could be wrong. Yeah. I think it's David. It's a longer name. But we'll put that in the show notes. We'll figure it out and send it in the show notes. And I've also been looking at these like LDS. I think it stands for something like low down something, and it's a store in like Detroit that basically it's a store for basses, but they also make custom equipment, and some of the amps, they're just doing cabinets, but some of the cabinets are sweet, and they'll give you like a 15 with 210s in one cabinet. Or like some weird configuration, like whatever you're looking for. Like they have the ability to machine what you want. Yeah, because they're doing and price friendly too. Yeah, so that is cool. Like I said, you can't get enough of them, man. All right. Well, that's a good place to wrap up for today. We hope you guys have enjoyed this discussion. We love talking about gear, and part of our mission for this podcast is to help you elevate your gigs and gear, maybe give you some ideas about your next amp. Hey, if you've got an amp that you loved or an amp that you hated, we would love to hear about it, really.
Yeah.
So when this post about the podcast pops up on Facebook, or if you go visit our website at practicalbass.com, we hope that you guys will send us your stories about amps that you loved or hated. Either way is fine. And we would love to read that. Hey, maybe we'll talk about that in the next show, or a show after that. We'll devote it to feedback on amps from our listeners. But you can give us that feedback, like I mentioned, on our website at practicalbass.com. You can email us at podcast@practicalbass.com. You can visit our Facebook page. You can visit us on Google+, on Twitter, even on Instagram. Send us a picture of your amps. That would be really cool. If we could get all of our listeners to snap a picture of their amps and send it to us on Instagram or whatever they like, that would be amazing. And we'll even repost them if you like.
Yeah.
And if you like what you're hearing, really, from me and Dave, from the bottom of our hearts, the thing that you could do that would make the most difference to us is subscribe to the podcast, right? So that we know you're out there. And all you have to do is you can visit the subscribe link on our website, practicalbass.com, and it will tell you the steps that you need to go through. They're really simple. If you have an iPhone, just go to the podcasts app. If you're on your computer or an Android device or something like that, go to Google Play Music if that's what you use. Stitcher Radio, I think, is another one, or Player.fm. Any of these podcatching apps, like iTunes on your Mac computer, any of those will let you subscribe to Practical Bass. So simply search for Practical Bass using their search tool. That should bring up our nice black and white PB logo, and then use the link provided to subscribe. And what that's going to do is it's going to deliver a fresh episode to you every week without you having to lift a finger. You don't have to go to the website. You don't have to go to your email, nothing. It'll just show up on your device. And then you can hear what the Rock over here has got cooking, right?
That's right.
Exactly. So, we really hope you guys will do that. Subscribe to the podcast. And, we hope to hear from you soon. And until next time, I am Paul Frields.
And I'm Dave Guzman.
This has been Practical Bass.
Thanks for listening.
Hi, I'm Paul. Oh, my God. Hi. WABC.
Zoinks!
Zoinks! Oh, God. Ah.